Hey guys, what's going on? Watermelon back again. Sorry about the no upload in November. I was on a business trip in Switzerland the whole month, and so I wasn't able to make a video. I decided to not double upload in December so that I could bring you a larger collection update video um, that I'm bringing you right now for the holidays. So hopefully you guys do enjoy. As always, subscribe, drop a like, that sort of stuff. So generally what I wanted to talk about today is the future of Yu-Gi-Oh collecting and showing off some of the stuff that I've actually picked up. Um, Generally, because Rarity collection, I haven't had to make or haven't been able to make a video showing off, some of the cards that I picked up from Rarity collection, my thoughts on the Rarity collection in general. So before I get into that, I'll just show off some of the other cards that I picked up. And then I'll really talk about Rarity collection, where I think Yu-Gi-Oh collecting is going, and whether I think it's a good thing or not. So we have Magicians of Bonds and Unity. This card was like $40 or so. And the original version back long ago, I picked it up. I thought it was a steal at like $120. It was like $180 or something like that market price. And I thought I had gotten the best deal in the world. And then it ended up falling. I think it's like maybe a $90 card now from the green background one out of Duelist Nexus. And then this one has just been so cheap. And what I've decided is that, if the new one comes out and it's $40, something like that, I'll just pick it up. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for it to try and go to 25. I don't, I'm able to afford it at 40. So this is the second one that I have. I actually think that these things are a lot of fun. I do like that this is the only printing of the card. I'm not expecting that they'll never reprint it in another rarity, but it's kind of fun to collect all four of the ones that are going to be released. So far, there are two, I think, in the new like Phantom Nightmare set, which I think is a really cool looking set. They have one with a red background, and so I'll be picking that up to, finish out the set up to the last one that comes out. And so this one's a really cool card. I think the yellow looks better than the green. So I'm generally happy with this pickup, and this is the style of collecting that I really like, and it's great that these things are so cheap. One thing I will say is that generally modern cards, which I've been more interested in modern recently since sort of finishing my collection goals, for the most part. So I haven't been picking up as much vintage, but I looked at some of the prices and man, vintage is cheap. It's hard to justify even spending $45 on Magicians of Bonds and Unity when I can buy a Chaos Emperor Dragon first edition near mint out of Invasion of Chaos for like 150. It's kind of crazy how cheap some of the old stuff is, and it becomes difficult to justify buying the new stuff, which is easier to get in good condition. And I don't know, generally it's just vintage is not holding up too well, and I'm sure these modern cards are going to fall out after some time. But these promos from the Megatins, these look really nice. I mean, if you're a budget collector, this is some of the best stuff you can get. I mean, this Cyber Dragon's one of my favorite cards, and you just look at the shine on this thing. This thing looks incredible. Well, I guess maybe this isn't the best example because this one is super off center. It looks kind of ugly because of that. I'm normally not someone who cares about centering unless it looks like it's miscut like that one. So you can see that this, I mean, the foiling looks quite nice. The embossed stamp on it looks quite nice. I mean, this is a home run in my opinion, and it's only like $4 or $5. I mean, it's super cheap. This thing looks insane. And so if you're just trying to get into collecting, or you're trying to save money while collecting, these promos are just incredible. I wonder what these things are going to do long term, because there's so many out there, but they look so nice. I mean, even a collector who's willing to spend, obviously, I'm blown away by the quality of these cards. They look insane. And for me, why would you spend, I don't know, $40? I forget how much the Cyber Dragon at a Ghost from the Past costs for a Ghost Rare, when you can get a beautiful quarter century secret rare for $5. I mean, I think that these new printings of quarter century secret rares, the Rarity collection, it's just going to destroy any sort of modern value, and it's going to destroy some of the vintage value, which a lot of people pretend like vintage is completely insulated from prices and modern stuff. You need both to perform in a healthy way. You need modern to keep people excited, because vintage, the problem is there's not something always coming out. But the the advantage is that people understand what they're getting into. You know, there's less of the stuff in mint condition out there than most of these modern cards. But modern is a lot of fun because there's always a new shiny thing. And it just so happens that the new shiny thing for these cards, I don't think Neos looks as good. If you compare the Neos to the Cyber Dragon, you can see that they, for whatever reason, with the Neos, they just let the foil and the, you know, the hollow foil shine go right over the artwork itself. Whereas with Cyber Dragon, they did it correctly, where the artwork is sort of over the foiling itself. So not all of these quarter century secret rares were given the same treatment, and I don't understand why. Like, this just doesn't look as good. The shine is over the artwork itself, whereas with the Cyber Dragon, it looks, you know, this is 10 out of 10. This is perfect. I don't know what they were doing with the Neos. It still looks cool because there's a ton of shine on it, but the shine goes right over the card. And so not all of these quarter century secret rares are given the same attention. Not all of the modern rarities, are given the same attention. And I'll show more examples of that. And this is all, you know, leading into the main point of today's video, that even though, you know, modern collecting is becoming cheaper, vintage collecting is becoming cheaper, which I like. I'm not someone who is, oh, stonk, stonk, stonk. You know, it's all going up until the end of time. I'm not like that. And again, Rainbow Dragon, they did it properly, where the card artwork, the main monster, is over the actual shine, so you can actually see that there's a Rainbow Dragon there. I don't like the name being gold. You just can't see it unless you really shine a light source on it. So I'm not a huge fan of every aspect of these cards, but they look incredible. I'm not going to take that away from them. And I'm someone who has Starlight rares. I'm not, you know, a salty boy. I think these look incredible, and it's great that this costs $1. And, you know, if you're a Rainbow Dragon fan, this is the card to get. The first edition Ghost Rare, that's expensive. Get this card. It's so much cheaper, and it's a lot of fun to collect stuff like this. But what I'm getting at is that a lot of these modern rarities, there just isn't the attention to detail that even, you know, a couple of months ago, or a couple of years ago, there was in the same rarity or similar rarities. So, you know, the obvious and, you know, example right here is that Neos, they just put the hollow foil right over it. Like, what the heck? That how do you let that happen? But there are other examples too. And so looking at something like Dark Honest, this is a new collector rare, which I don't know what they were doing printing this in collector rare. I'm happy because I like this card a lot, and I think the card artwork looks incredible, but why would you print this? I know there's an Honest, and I'll pick up the Honest as well, and I guess they're trying to make a set, but look at the foiling. Look at the texture on this card. There's barely any texture on this thing. You can't really see a whole lot. Look at it. There's not a whole lot going on beyond the sort of embossed card or monster artwork. The background, there's no texture there, which is really disappointing for me, because if you look at other cards, this is from 2023, obviously just released, look at something like Vinamanaga. This is something I picked up. It was $35. You know, I'm not huge on grading modern cards, but $35 is nothing. You know, that's nothing. But look at the texture on this thing. Not to get sidetracked, but man, that looks so incredible. And you know, how do we go from this to that? Well, I can tell you why. This is not an expensive card. This was not, even though the foiling is incredible on this, this is not something that was deemed successful. People didn't end up caring a whole lot about the quality of the rarity. And it's a bit unfortunate because I've been a huge fan of collector rare. People don't notice the difference, or I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion around the difference between these Ancient Guardians collector rares, which they did an incredible job on. Look at Snake Rain, look at Vinamanaga, look at some of the Ursartic stuff, like Septentrion, Grand Chariot. It looks insane. The texture is really noticeable. And then the modern stuff, or the, you know, 2 years later, they basically have nothing on the card art. And it's very, very disappointing. You could start to see it already with King's Court. They decided, you know, who cares about the actual quality of the rarity? People just care about the card being in that rarity. And so you can look at something like Jack's Knight, I believe, at a King's Court, and you can already see that they stopped putting a lot of attention to detail. And this all leads me to the Rarity collection, where now they're, you know, mass producing these rarities, and they don't put the same attention to detail, and it's really disappointing. So here's the Prismatic collector rare. This card had a collector rare out of Toon Chaos. Toon Chaos was the worst version of the collector rare. prior to the Rarity collection, because they just hadn't figured out how to put enough texture. It looks different than the other collector rares. By Genesis Impact, they really had it understood, and they had good quality collector rares in there. But you can see there is next to no foiling on this thing. It's just so disappointing because there's not a whole lot on the Chaos Space artwork, and they just decided to put no texture on it. It's, you know, there is some texture you can see, but it's not that good, and it's a bit disappointing that it's so flat. There are these sparkles on the card, which honestly I think just make it look kind of cheap. I'm not a huge fan of the sparkles. And then the, you know, external part, the card border is done in the same way as they had previously done it. But it's a bit disappointing to have so little texture on this card. And I get that you're trying to print the rarity so that you can make however 100 or something cards in this new rarity, but this is the thing people don't talk about. They say, oh, it's great, we can get all these cards in this rarity. But if they don't make individual textures, or they don't put the effort in the textures on the cards, what's the point of having it in that rarity? Just make everything an ultra rare, and then select certain cards that you're going to spend the time to actually make the you know, collector rare pop. I'm not a huge fan of just, you know, claiming it's a collector rare. You can see the depreciation, you can see the, not depreciation, but you can see how little effort they put into individual collector rares. And even a set that's deemed as super successful, it's disappointing for me to have a set deemed as super successful when they put so little effort into the individual cards. It's great that it's accessible, that, you know, I love that players are getting staple cards for cheap. People are getting cards that are collectible for cheap. But it's disappointing when they don't put any time into it. And then look at Chaos Space Prismatic Ultimate Rare. I'm not a huge fan of the Prismatic Ultimate Rare. I haven't been even when it was in the OCG, and there's a lot more texture on that version. For me, it's just kind of, okay, you know, similar to the Collector Rare. You know, okay, I see a little bit of texture here, but what's going on? I do like, funnily enough, I generally like the Prismatic Ultimate Rare more than I like the Prismatic Collector Rare, just because it's basically the same thing, just you don't have these like kind of cheap looking sparkles all throughout the card. And I guess the border's not like a Collector Rare, but for me the Prismatic Ultimate Rare is pretty similar to the Collector Rare. It just, for me, it looks a little bit better. Because they're not putting any effort into the texture on either of them. And so it just looks better to not have the cheap sparkles than to have them. So that's, you know, just expressing some of my disappointment. We can look at a couple more Prismatic Ultimate Rares. I think this one looks a lot better. You can see that there is actually, you know, the change of heart that is popping out of the text box. That's great, but there's no texture behind it. And you can see that the production quality was terrible. I don't know how well you can see that there's scratches, or not scratches, but print lines all over the card. And I'm generally not someone to critique print quality that much, but it's, you know, it's clear that they are just trying to pump out as much stuff as possible in these rarities, put no effort into designing the rarities, and then, you know, pass off the product as, you know, this, as we should be thankful that we're getting something like this. It's a little frustrating for me. And then I also have Egyptian God Slime. This Ultimate Rare, you can see it pops a bit more as well. This one, I think, is pretty nice. I do think they did a better job on this one. There are certain Prismatic Ultimate Rares, like Lone Fire Blossom, that they knocked out of the park. And so you can see that there's certain cards where they did a good job. And imagine if every card looked, you know, not everything's going to be as good, but imagine if they had the time, or they put the time into designing every Ultimate Rare, Prismatic Ultimate Rare, to look that good. Here's Egyptian God Slime. This one looks quite good. And so generally I'm happier with the Prismatic Ultimate Rare than I am the Prismatic Collector Rare. I have a couple more Prismatic Collector Rares before I get to some of the other cards that I picked up. So we've got two pots. We've got Pot of Prosperity Collector Rare. Again, look, there's basically no texture on it. It's so disappointing to see this. And it's coming from someone who has seen the OCG version of this. There's so much more pop. There's so much more depth to the layers on the card. It's just, it's kind of sad to see that we ended up getting this much flatter version. And it's sad to see, especially knowing that they have the capability to make these textures. The OCG doesn't have this sort of unique texture style like on cards like Venomanaga. They just don't. They have the same texture style on basically every card, where it's sort of this it's like this angular effect where there's a swirl on the background. I thought it was incredible, and it seems like they've done that for the prismatic collector where every card has sort of the same radial, I don't know how to say it. Here, let's look at Chaos Space again. You can see it right here. It's this sort of flat texture that is trying to just extend in a swirl-like motion around the card. That's basically how the OCG does it, just they do it with a lot more pop, so it looks a lot better. But I was so happy that in the TCG, they decided to make different texture patterns for the card, and they made them all pop so well. And that's why I love the collector rare. That's why I went after the collector rares. It's because they did such a good job on them, or at least they used to. And a lot of the new ones don't pop like that anymore. And then we can also look at Pot of Desires as well. Again, flat texture, just kind of bland in general. So a little disappointing for me for the Rarity collection. I'm happy that players are getting a lot of staple cards for cheap. That was necessary. And I commend Konami for implementing that because it makes the game more playable and more accessible. But some of those decisions really I'm a little disappointed in how the end product ended up, or how the final product ended up. So before we end, I'll show off some of the other stuff I've been picking up. I've been picking up a ton of these Lost Art cards. You can see the Gemini Elf. I've had success in the past selling these things, especially if you can get them sealed. It does really, really well. But for me, if I can pick these Gemini Elf cards up for $2, $3, $3.50, especially if I'm picking other stuff up and so I don't have to pay extra for shipping, these things are really, really nice. And I'm generally a big fan of the Lost Art, especially for kind of iconic cards like Gemini Elf, where there is a noticeable difference in the actual artwork. That's one of the big things I look for. Is I'm not a huge fan of when they just barely change one aspect of the card, or when it's a card that's kind of obscure. For example, Exodia. If you've seen Lost Art Exodia, okay, there's a star in the back. Doesn't really affect a whole lot. Gemini Elf, obviously it's the uncensoring of the breasts on the Gemini Elf, but so it's more noticeable. But other cards, other Lost Arts that I've been picking up, you got Donzalug. I was lucky enough I got a lot of these from the same seller, and some of them ended up being still sealed, and so that was really nice. He has the guns. Not a huge noticeable change on these as well, but it still is noticeable, and Donzalug, I think, is a pretty iconic card. So I'm a huge fan of these Lost Arts, and I'm just generally, if I see them for a steal, if I see a seller who's trying to move a lot of these things, I try to pick up the ones that I like. Here was a good pickup. I got 4 of them for like $1 each, and they were still sealed. I love the Acts of Despair artwork. It's very, very noticeable. And for me, Acts of Despair was a card that, when you were playing Playground Yu-Gi-Oh!, it was very useful to have your card have its attack raised by 1,000. And then some of the final cards, we've got Parasite. Obviously, this has a huge difference in the card artwork. Not the most iconic artwork or card, but for me, again, this is so cheap, and the art looks different. And then the other big thing is these, to an extent, are less likely to get reprints. Obviously, they've reprinted the Lost Art Dark Magician Girl, but things like Parasite, I don't see them re-waving that. There's so many other Lost Arts to do. It's not going to ever get the demand of a Dark Magician Girl. And then here's Barrel Dragon. These were like $1 each. I just picked up, I think, 10 of them. The seller had more. I probably could have picked up more, but for me, if I can get these cards for 10, I actually don't like the Lost Art version of Barrel Dragon as much as the regular version, but it's $1, and so I'm willing to sit on 10 of these at $1. So hopefully you guys did enjoy. This was kind of a weird, ranty video. I'm recording this probably a week before I even upload it. If you guys did enjoy, as always, drop a like. It's been your boy, Wato Marmelon. Subscribe, and peace out.